Joining us now, Susan Platt. It's a long history here on Susan Platt. She got a long resume. Let's see, where should I start? She's very youthful, so we'll start there. She ran for lieutenant governor in 2017. Susan, I want to date you. She ran for lieutenant governor 2017, and she finished second to Justin Fairfax. I bet you'd rather have Susan Platt as your lieutenant governor right now than Justin Fairfax. So if you voted for Fairfax, should have voted for Platt. That's one thing. Secondly, she's got her own radio show called The Susan Platt Show. Hear the Roar, Saturdays, 9 a.m. Plus, she sits in for Joe Morrissey Thursdays, 10 to noon, right up till the primary. She'll be on tomorrow, 2 hours, 10 to noon. Special edition of The Susan Platt Show. Plus, she's one of the nicest young ladies you'll ever meet. Plus, she was Joe Biden's chief of staff, so if Biden gets a nomination, then we can call her up every day and make fun of her. So, she's joining us now. Susan, great to have you with us.
John, thank you so much for having me on today. And it's Platitudes. Susan Platt's Platitudes. Find your roar.
Susan Platt's Platitudes. Find your roar. Love your show name. And you'll be on WJFN today and next Thursday and the Thursday after that, 10 to noon, live, yep. WJFN, 100.5 FM. If you're not in the Richmond listening area, go to WJFNradio.com for Platitudes and the Susan Platt Show. Special edition, Thursday, today, next week, week after that, 10 to noon with our producer there, Al Green. So, Susan, coming up tomorrow, what do you have in store for us?
Well, I've invited a few other guests, but I'm going to continue some guests I think you won't particularly care for politically. I think you like them personally, but politically you may not. But what I'm going to continue talking about is something I talked about last week, and I launched it last week, which is something called Just Good Business. Who can be against that, right?
I'm for Just Good Business. I'm for that.
So what we're talking about is supporting equality for women is just good business. And I got a couple questions for you.
Yes.
Did you know, John?
Yes.
That 83% of all spending is influenced by women?
In my household, probably 95.
That's what I hear a lot from men. Mm-hmm. Did you know that over 83% of Virginians support the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment?
Well, they should, because I'm in favor of it also.
I know you are. And, you and I do not agree on a lot of things politically, but I have great respect for you. You are fair, and you support the Equal Rights Amendment. I don't see how people can't, particularly when you look at the numbers. You're looking at...
but wait a minute. Ken Cuccinelli says, this is his line that everybody picked up. Let me read you his line. By the way, we don't really like each other, so everybody knows that. But here's his line. If you pass the Equal Rights Amendment, it will enshrine abortion in the Constitution. How do you respond to that?
This is just something that conservatives have talked about for years. And let me just say this. I am Catholic, just as you are, John. And I don't know that I could ever have an abortion if that were the case, and I didn't. But who am I to say about somebody else's body? And I think, frankly, the fact that it is current law, and all the Equal Rights Amendment is talking about, if you read what it is, it says, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. And I will tell you, one of your good buddies who's passed in 2016, Antonin Scalia, one of our Supreme Court justices, said in September 2010, certainly, and I'm quoting him here, certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't.
Well, look,
so even one of your conservative buddies, Judge Scalia, said it doesn't. It's time. It's really time. There are so many women now that are heading households. 4 in 10 families are led by women breadwinners. The average pay gap is 20%. And if you're an African-American woman or you're a Latina woman, your pay gap is, let me get the numbers here correctly. African-American women, it's a 39% pay gap. Latina women, it's 47%. I'm not sure if you're a single mother nowadays how you're going to be able to survive. And I'll tell you how they survive is they have 2 and 3 jobs. So what we're trying to do here is just enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment. And I'll talk, Ken Cuccinelli is just, I'm sorry, he's just crazy. He's just, we used to call him Ken Cuccinelli. And, he's trotting out these tired old lines to try to keep women under control, maybe is the word. I don't know what it is. But, you look at Delegate Dave LaRocque, okay?
Yes.
What's he talking about? He said, if we pass the Equal Rights Amendment, God forbid, then women will walk around bare-chested. Now, I don't know about you, John, but I don't have any desire to do that. And this is what's happened now. Because more and more people support this, these arguments are becoming more and more ridiculous. I talked to a client the other day, and I was talking about the Equal Rights Amendment, and he looked at me, he said, you mean that thing that was around in the 70s and the 80s? And I said, yeah. He said, you mean it didn't pass? That's a lot of the opinion out there. People don't realize, and men don't realize, women don't realize it didn't pass. And it's time that it does pass because more and more women are out in the workforce. 47% of the workforce in America is made up of women.
Okay, so the other argument against it, I'm for it. I'm just giving you the other side that I've heard, and I certainly did hear the Dave LaRocque bare-chested statement. Personally, I don't have an objection to that, but I get it, right? So that's fine, but I think that it's to your point, the arguments against the ERA are getting more hysterical when you make comments like that. But from a business owner, one of the concerns that business owners have is, now I have to comply with more paperwork and things like that. Well, my answer to that is, okay, if you run a business, you already have to comply with a bunch of things, including EOC, right? Equal opportunity,
exactly.
Right? I mean, that law passed, and it's a good thing, not a bad thing. So in a booming economy, as a business owner, here's what happens. You have to compete for the best workers, and wages go up because you don't have the available pool of candidates you had 2 or 3 or 4 years ago. So it fixes itself. And so if you pass it, it's going to have a little impact. I'll give you an example. I needed a producer. We hired Kiara, right? There was no debate about what we could pay her because she's a female or not female or a male. It was, we want her. She's negotiating with us. She was the best candidate that we had. And so we made her an offer. She countered. We countered. She countered. We agreed. Okay. And so it's in line with whatever the ERA would be anyway, because we're in a tight employment market. And as a business owner, you want the best workers. So the whole argument against it, to me, is really ridiculous because you're doing it anyway. So just pass it, whatever. If that makes you happy, Susan, I'm all in favor of it, because at the end of the day, businesses are going to hire the best people, and women in the workforce now, if they produce the same, they're going to get paid the same. Otherwise, you're not going to keep them.
That's right.
So that's right. Why when people say, oh, John, you're in favor of ERA, it's this and that, enshrines a proportion. Look, that's all nonsense. You're going to hire the best people. And just like, look, I remember as a young man when EOC was coming down the pike, and every business had to comply with that. And I remember the same arguments. Oh, my God, so all this paperwork, so all this bureaucracy. Okay, well, it passed. You dealt with it. I remember what was the handicap bill, ADA, what was that? Americans
for Disability Act.
I remember that. I was a young executive when that went through, and I remember we had a corporate meeting. I worked for a Fortune 200 company. We had a big meeting. We had to fly to Chicago, and it took a day. All the vice presidents like I was had to go over everything it meant, and everybody complained about that, and it's fine. So these are laws you have that make things right, ensure that businesses comply with them. Nobody went out of business over the ADA. Nobody went out of business over EOC, and nobody's going to go out of business because of ERA. So the arguments against it are pure nonsense, in my view. It is
ridiculous. And you drive up and down 95 or 64, you'll see many billboards, or even look in your newspaper. Businesses are marketing to women. They know that women are the ones that buy the bulk of the services and products. So, you're already you're catering to us in a way, but you're not giving us our equal pay. I really don't quite understand. I've got a friend out here, out in Loudoun County now. We have a lot of wineries and vineyards. And Ron and I like to travel to all of them. Now that, I never was a big drinker, but now that I'm out here, gosh, the wine is so good. Mm-hmm. And I sat and talked to one of my friends who owns one of these vineyards, and she just said, I don't want to get involved in politics. I support this 100%. I don't want to get involved in politics because I'll lose business. And I sat and looked at her, I said, Diane, 83% of Virginians support this. If you lose a customer or two, think about the business you will gain by being promoted. And the idea behind this, John, is last year the folks that supported the VA ratified ERA did a terrific job. And that includes the delegates and Senators McClellan and Carol Foy, and the list goes on, some good advocates. But one thing they didn't do is engage any businesses. Now, I'm not going to guarantee here that I'm going to get a whole lot of businesses. I'm shooting for 100. And why 100 by January 2020? Because it is the centennial 2020 of women getting the right to vote. I think it's about time that we're named in the Constitution at some point here and talk about equal rights. But the one thing they didn't do is engage businesses to why it's good for business. Because women support business. Women are, as I said, 60% of those living in poverty are women. We need to make sure that we're getting paid what we need to sustain our families. There are a lot of single women out there that need help, and a lot of households that are led by women breadwinners. So I would say to any business, if you're marketing to women, it's good business. You know it's good business to market to women. Let's start paying them what they need to be paid. In a lot of cases, they are. But this would just enshrine the rights on a level that is across the country. Because the U.S. Constitution does not explicitly guarantee those rights, that it protects are held equally by all citizens, and that's what we need. And I just believe that it is just good business, or I wouldn't be doing this. And I do plan to travel around the Commonwealth, getting more businesses support. And, one place I'm going to, John, is Shenandoah Valley. Mm-hmm. Todd Gilbert's district, the guy who stopped it from coming to the House of Delegates floor. Mm-hmm. I'm going there, I'm meeting with women business owners, and I'll be traveling all over across the Commonwealth, putting some folks on the radio, John, and talking about why it's needed.
Let me read you a couple texts here, and you can respond to it. Russ in Richmond says, Susan blames the business owner because women don't negotiate better pay. How does that make sense? How do you respond to that?
He has a point. He really has a point. Women tend to undervalue themselves because it's something that we've been doing. It's something that we've had to fight so hard to get where we are that we tend to underestimate. I don't disagree with him. It's time that we start advocating for ourselves, and that's why I talk about platitudes. Find your roar. It took me a long time to find mine. And I think once we do and once we have it enshrined, we will do a better job of that. But he's correct. I don't dispute that.
Okay, this is from Mike Watson, former House Delegates member, Newport News area. He says, look, I'm not going to comment on the ERA, but Susan's comment on pay gap, if there's a 39% pay gap between men and African-American women, is she claiming that this is for the same job and skills? If not, is she suggesting with the ERA that there'll be no differentiation in pay between skilled and non-skilled workers?
We're talking about equal pay for equal work. That's what this is all about. So let's not kind of mix our questions here and mix our subject matters. And the average, it is the average. 39% is the average. Of course, some are higher, some are lower. But that's what this is all about. You can't broaden out this argument to say something like that. It's about equal pay for equal work.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I come from the standpoint of a business owner. The reason I'm for the ERA and people that get upset over this is, why not, right? In the Trump economy, and I know, Susan, you're not for Trump, blah, blah, blah. I get all that. But in the Trump economy, of which you are now a willing participant and successful in the Trump economy, you have to compete for workers. And whether they're male or female, in a tightening market, wages go up, and women should be paid the same. I mean, there should not be a differentiation between a male and a female that have the same skill. That's why I'm in favor of the ERA. What I'm not in favor is, I think it was Jennifer Boysko, the senator, I like her, had a bill where you had to prove that raises were the same. That's a bureaucratic nightmare, right? Because
Yeah.
if I've got two employees doing the same job, one in Richmond and one in Portsmouth, and I give Kiera a 3 and she gets a 2% raise, and I give Al a 5 and he gets a 5% raise, I don't want to have to defend that to the state government, right? I mean, I don't want to do that.
understand. Yeah.
And if they're unhappy, leave, quit, get another job. But as far as equal pay, as a business owner, I got to compete for the best employees. And so we're doing it anyway. So go ahead and sign it. Who cares? ADA didn't matter.
What this is
EOC
about,
didn't matter.
If the ERA were ratified, and remember, it's down to one state.
All right, I got to go.
37
We're out of
states
time.
have passed it. Virginia passes it. We're
Susan,
there,
I got to roll.
okay?
Love you. Susan,
Well, wait,
Platt.
but it says here equal protection from discrimination for all people regardless of sex. That's one of the things it would codify into law.
Susan, we're out of time. Thank you. Susan Platt, 10 a.m. tomorrow, Thursday, WJFNradio.com, WJFN 100.5 FM.